There is a real need for money, and I hope
Yeah.
Grant Shapps, when he's now sitting in the MOD being briefed, I hope he's realising the full import of the problems that are facing defence, of the hollowing out that has happened, and that he will go in and fight the Treasury.
Ben Wallace was a captain in the Scots Guards before he entered politics, and lots of people thought his military experience was pretty good. Admiral Lord West, former head of the Royal Navy, former security minister under Gordon Brown, joins me. Good morning.
Good morning.
Does it matter if a defence secretary hasn't got military experience, do you think?
Well, I think it's possible to have a defence secretary who hasn't had military experience. Heseltine, for example, is an example of that. But I think if one looks at the situation the world is in at the moment, it's probably more dangerous and uncertain than at any time in my entire career. And I'm still on the active list, but I mean that's over 50 years. It's a very, very dangerous world. There's a war going on in Europe. There are risks all over the place, whether it's in the Far East with China, the South China Sea, countries falling in the Sahel, Wagner Group's pressure, war in the Yemen. I mean, the world is very, very dangerous, and there are really big issues with our defence forces. And I think, bearing that in mind, it would have probably been better to have someone who did have a bit of past experience in the military. And I'm afraid Grant Shapps doesn't have that, and there has to be an underlying concern that he actually has been placed there because he's been a sort of bit of a firefighter, rushed in and done various. I think he's done a large number of jobs, and he comes over quite well on in the media. To be quite honest, he speak well, but he's been put in there because he will be able to say sort of the right words to make people feel things are all very well, and he won't rock the boat in terms of defence spending. When you look at the letters, sorry, yes.
No, I was going to say, just given all those security, when you lay them all out like that, it's pretty extraordinary, the security and defence threats that we face. You were a security minister. You're on the Intelligence and Security Committee. Do you think Grant Shapps, as the new defence secretary, will have to give up using his much-loved TikTok?
Well, I think hopefully he's getting advice on that within the MOD at the moment. I have to say, if I were him, I would. But he will get advice about exactly how to use that. But it is of concern. And we recently produced a report on China from the ISC, and we need to look very carefully at all these sort of arenas where there is action taking place that one can trace back to mainland China. But I was going to mention the actual letters. I mean, it was very interesting, wasn't it? In Ben Wallace's letter, he made it absolutely clear that the government has used the defence budget as a discretionary spend and made savings. Discretionary spend. To think of defence as discretionary spend, I'm afraid, is a sort of, it has gone on for many years, actually. And he also uses the word hollowing out. And there's no doubt our armed forces are hollowed out. And it is a very dangerous world. And there's no doubt military experts, all military experts, and I'm sure you've spoken to lots of them, would agree that defence expenditure should rise significantly, not just a little bit. And yet the letter in response from the Prime Minister, doesn't. It talks about defence on a stable footing. That's hardly inspirational, is it? And then an aspiration for defence spending to reach 2.5%. Well, I thought it was more than an aspiration. We certainly need more than that. We need sort of 3%. There is a real need for money, and I hope Grant Shapps, when he's now sitting in the MOD being briefed, I hope he's realising the full import of the problems that are facing defence, of the hollowing out that has happened, and that he will go in and fight the Treasury and within the Star Chamber for money for defence, and not rock the boat, which I think is why Sunak put him there, to not rock the boat.
Admiral Lord West, really good to speak to you. Thanks so much for joining us today. Former head of the Royal Navy and former security minister under Gordon Brown.